there were Sudanese people all over the world that were celebrating those attacks on the United Arab Emirates. I was one of them. I think that this empty nation that survives on nothing but the blood of African people and on the enslavement of its migrant labor force, that it was only created in order to be this regional enforcer for the United States in the Middle East, in West Asia. It is a poison to our world. That this poison is spreading. That it is harming, especially African people on the African continent.
How is the Strait of Hormuz closing, and how is the Iran attacking UAE? How are all those things affecting the backing of the RSF?
That the drone attacks have been severely limited due to the supply chain, the disruptions in the RSF supply chain, and that has been due to Iran. And so there is still an active genocide happening, and still the RSF is also still doing drone attacks, but we'll get to this shortly, that the drone attacks have been severely limited due to the supply chain, the disruptions in the RSF supply chain, and that has been due to Iran.
And that's what I want to ask you next. Ever since the war began, U.S. Israel against Iran, and Iran started bombing other Arabian countries around it, including the UAE, which we all know is backing the RSF majorly. Now, the first thing when I saw it in the news, when the first bomb landed in UAE, I immediately thought to myself, how is this going to affect Sudan? Then I remembered UAE supporting RSF, so I was like, oh, maybe if Iran weakens the UAE, this might have a positive effect to weaken the backing of the RSF. So my question is this: how is the Strait of Hormuz closing, and how is the Iran attacking UAE? How are all those things affecting the backing of the RSF? And is that the reason why there's a little bit of progress after the war? I know there's, I know, like the way you've mentioned, there've been progress before the war, but is that the main reason why there's major progress that is weakening the RSF after the war?
Yeah, very much so. So like I said, the military advances were happening beforehand, but have been very much so strengthened with Iran's actions, in particular Iran's action of blockading the Strait of Hormuz, which they have the control of the key passage to through the Strait of Hormuz, which is where the most of the world's oil comes through. And oil, the UAE's oil revenue is very central to its economy. So this has been extremely disruptive to the UAE's capacity, and therefore the RSF's logistics has completely disrupted the UAE RSF supply chain. This has also greatly impacted the UAE's stability, economic stability, its tourism industry, which is also a central point to its existence. If you don't know already, if you do not, you should be boycotting the United Arab Emirates, and you should definitely not be traveling to the United Arab Emirates, because that is like very directly supporting this genocidal state that is not only facilitating this genocide in Sudan, but is destabilizing African countries throughout the Horn of Africa, is attempting to destabilize African countries within the Sahel and Central Africa. So we have to we have to be very conscious about particularly the United Arab Emirates' role here. And I'll be honest with you, there were Sudanese people all over the world that were celebrating those attacks on the United Arab Emirates. within, and I was one of them. I think that this empty nation that survives on nothing but the blood of of African people and on the enslavement of its migrant labor force, that this empty nation should not exist. That it was only created in order to be this regional enforcer for the United States in the Middle East, in West Asia, and that it should not exist. That all civilians should be evacuated, and that this nation should be eliminated from existence. I sincerely believe that, and I believe that it's a like the Zionist entity, that it is a poison to our world. That this poison is spreading. That it is harming, especially African people on the African continent, and we'll go into that as well when we talk about the African countries that are involved and how the UAE is facilitating their involvement. But the UAE, the RSF's weapons and funding has been severely limited, and especially its drone capability. So it's the supply of the drones has been almost entirely cut within the past 2 weeks, and that's been a lot of the RSF's strategy throughout the eastern regions of Sudan is drone attacks, and also deploying drone attacks before it tries to retake a region. And so this has been severely disrupted and limited. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about like kind of global, like all of our fates are tied, and that our liberation is very much so tied. When the UAE is disrupted, Sudan is being liberated. Many many parts of Somalia are being liberated because the UAE has actively gone into is actively a part of the fragmentation of and destabilization of Somalia, as well as the Zionist entity Israel. But to be clear, that the genocide has not stopped in Sudan. That the UAE's supply chain disruption is weakening RSF expansion in particular, and also RSF drone strike capability. And so this has been really great news, but the genocide continues, and the US and the UAE have responded by pivoting in a couple of ways, which we'll also get to.
Wow. Now the people are hopeful. The war has directly sort of improved the progress that's going on in Sudan, which is weakening the RSF. That's the only progress that needs to happen now, is weakening the RSF. Now, one thing that I'd like to ask you is, are they hopeful that should the Iran war continue to happen, the Sudanese people, because I know you have, because I know you communicate with your people on a daily basis, if not, more than us, for sure. Are they hopeful that this war is going to end by the end of the year?
So I want to be clear that Iran will win this war. That, I mean, by all political analysis figures and processes, like Iran has been prepared for this illegal attack for some time now, and so this is really has already created a shift in the global in the global order, that now that oil, you can you no longer have to just buy oil with the petrodollar. So the US's economy is very much so tied to the to oil, to the oil supply chain, and that's through the petrodollar. But now the Chinese are now you can now buy your oil with yen, and that is I mean that's already and this order of the US being the global hegemon, the controller of the global economy is drawing to a close. And so what will happen, most certainly will happen within the next years, will be a decline in the US's domination of the global order, and that will in turn materially benefit and I hope and I pray will liberate much of the global south, because the US is the main entity that is that has created the oppression and domination of the global south. So I'm hopeful. Many Sudanese people are similarly similarly hopeful in this decline. But as the U.S. is declining, it's kicking in. It's going to be kicking and screaming, especially Trump's regime, and that's affecting a lot of real civilians, a lot of real people, especially within the U.S. as it does this ethnic cleansing campaign on migrants and anyone who is not white within the U.S. So it's it's going to. I believe I'm hopeful in the long term, but right now it's going to be a dark time where the U.S. is going to do all of similar to the RSF, all of these counterattacks, all of these kind of retaliatory attacks that only a very weakened entity would partake in. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. The war is intensifying. When I was looking at the news, I was like, wow, this Iran is tough, and they don't look like they're backing down. These guys are tough. This guy is like they've been waiting on this for a long time, and they've been preparing for a very long time. You can see that these guys are not going to go down, and if they're going down swinging, and it doesn't look like they're going down. And when I look at that, I'm like, wow, maybe, sometimes, Suad is like when we were in school and there was that bully who used to bully certain kids. And then one day, the person who was always been bullied stands up to the bully, and the bully gets scared, and the bully is like, oh, so you can also stand up for yourself. That's what's happening now between US and Iran and Israel as well. So I think I want to ask you one thing. A few months ago, Mohammed bin Salman, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, I saw him tell Trump that, you need to also help Sudan. First of all, Suad, where do you stand with Saudi Arabia when it comes to Sudan? And what do you think about Trump? Because I think he was saying that because Trump allegedly is involved in the peace talks between DRC and Rwanda. Well, we all know that he doesn't care about peace. He wants the minerals, and it's not me saying it. That's Trump saying that he wants the minerals. Now he was telling him that now focus on Sudan as well. Go bring peace in Sudan. But before you go to Trump, I want to know, what do you think about Saudi Arabia when it comes to Sudan?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I really wish that he hadn't put Trump's attention on Sudan. We don't want Trump's attention or any of his, like you said, they're not peace talks. They are extraction talks. They're simply this extraction deal that the U.S. and the UAE partnered on around Congo, that they now and have been wanting to bring to Sudan for some time. And even before Trump, the Biden regime wanted to. So this peace talks with Sudan simply means that the UAE and RSF are going to be at the head of these negotiations with Sudan to talk about who's going to control, to lay out and divide Sudan, fragment Sudan, and say we will capitulate to the RSF. We will give the RSF the what peace talks would look like is that the RSF would say, okay, we need the west of Sudan is going to be we're going to make our own country, and that the U.S. would be facilitating this happening. And of course, I want to point out that this genocidal militia cannot have control. Non-state armed group cannot have control of land. It is not a governance force. It's not any type of any type of popular support in any way. But nonetheless, we know that the RSF is not going to stay within, even if it takes over one part, even if it takes over one country, even if it takes over Sudan, the entirety of Sudan, it has proven already that this genocidal militia is not going to stay contained to one part of Africa. It's already gone into Chad, gone into South Sudan. There have been attacks on by these militiamen within surrounding countries. So yeah, just it's a completely destabilizing force throughout Africa. I want us to be aware of that such a result of these talks would not only affect Sudan, that this would have a really devastating impacts throughout the African continent. But Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabia is not I don't consider Saudi Arabia to be an material ally of Sudan, but it is not an enemy of Sudan. It is not a UAE, because I think Saudi Arabia gets lumped into the UAE because these are both Gulf countries. Saudi Arabia has not provided weaponry to this genocidal militia. It has not provided any type of support to this militia. It is aligned with the U.S. And so would peace talks that are led by the U.S. and Saudi Arabia would produce the same result of the RSF being able to be legitimized and take land, Sudanese land, and thus, so I think Saudi Arabia also wants a cut of the resources. Saudi Arabia would be looking at peace talks similarly from an extraction standpoint, of getting a cut of some of the resources that come out of such a deal. So there's distrust, but I want to be clear that Saudi Arabia is not the UAE, because I was watching some podcast recently where they kept confusing Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and I think because they're both Gulf states, that they're talked about as the same as the same country, and they kept saying Saudi Arabia is conducting or facilitating a genocide in Sudan, but they meant the UAE. And so just to be clear, these are two different countries with very different relationships to the U.S. too. Saudi Arabia is allied with the U.S. The UAE is a client state of the U.S. The UAE would not exist without the U.S., similar to Israel. So very critically, I want to make that distinction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Suad, before we go to the involvement of other African people into the backing of the RSF, there are people who are watching you for the first time, and by now they're like, why and how is the UAE supporting the RSF? what are their motives, and why are they doing it, and how are they doing it? I know we said it in the first episode, and I know you explained it vividly, but there are people who are watching this video for the first time, and I always believe in repetition. In every interview I go, Suad, I repeat the same points every single time when it comes to Pan Africanism, because that's teaching. Teaching is about repetition. You know, so what do you just explain to people how the UAE is backing the RSF and why?
Yes, so the United Arab Emirates, so the RSF is a proxy militia of the United Arab Emirates. Without the United Arab Emirates, the RSF would not be able to exist. It would not be able to. So the United Arab Emirates provides all of the RSF's arms, fighters, and most of its funding, and it does it. So the UAE is not only this this arms supplier and funder of the RSF, but it is also a coordinator of the RSF. The RSF has active bases in the UAE that we've done many human rights reports and complaints on Sudanese people being detained in these RSF bases within the UAE. It also the RSF doesn't have any of its own doesn't have any of its own bases throughout the surrounding African countries surrounding Sudan. It uses UAE bases, and the UAE has many bases throughout the Horn of Africa and Central Africa and Northern Africa. So the UAE is this hub, this logistical hub for the RSF. Where all of its supply chain, including the fighters that come in, because the RSF is made up mostly of mercenary fighters from surrounding countries and also from other countries like Colombia. They're brought in through UAE planes, through UAE bases in surrounding countries, and then brought in primarily through Chad, but recently also through Ethiopia, where we'll also get to the recent updates around Ethiopia allying itself with the UAE and providing this very key support of the RSF within the eastern borders of Sudan. But within the past 3 years, it's mostly gone in through Chad, where the UAE hosts its main RSF, the UAE bases that are mainly used by the RSF to get in those arms and those fighters through Chad into Sudan. And so it is facilitating this genocide in Sudan. And what is getting in exchange is the extraction of resources, primarily gold, because the UAE is the main exporter of gold, but it doesn't have a single gold mine. And so all of its gold supplies come in through the theft of gold and the extraction of gold, primarily from Sudan, but also from Congo. The UAE has also been extracting a lot of gold and other minerals like tin from the DRC.